Hi. So let's talk about spiritual awakening, because it is the most incredible thing that you can experience. Imagine one day, you've been walking along your whole life thinking that you were indeed walking along through this Cartesian objective external reality. But then one day, just like a balloon bursting, you realize that you were the environment. You were this infinite field of consciousness that we're just receiving, and that the brain is not just conceiving consciousness. We're not these localized sort of computers walking around in this objective reality, but rather we are actually participating in life itself, which is consciousness, which is energy, which is God. It's the mind of God, it's the infinite mind. That's a rather big day, isn't it? That's a rather big day of someone's existence. And we call it the baptism of fire, we call it the chemical wedding, we call it a sort of renaissance, really, of your own consciousness coming back to a much vaster state of being. And so I'm wondering, have you been through that? Wasn't it an abrupt thing? Was it a Satori awakening like they depict in the Matrix? Or was it a more gradual thing? Do you have spiritual parents, and have you just been sort of raised in that environment? That wasn't the case for me. I was very much raised in a sort of secular, atheistic, normalized, rather simplistic household. And that, I feel, is part of the reason why I actually experienced this in a way, because it sort of immunized me, just like Henri Bergson was saying. It's like, fortunately, some are born with spiritual immune systems that sooner or later give rise and become aware of the deception and the illusion of the world. But I feel like you're only granted that immunity if you're somehow able to see through or not participate to some level with the education system and the things that we're going to get programmed with, becoming sort of excessively interested in conventional human history, science, mathematics, English, any of these subjects which actually ultimately fracture the mind. There lies the trap. That's the prison, the left brain sort of incarceration that prevents people from actually having one of these experiences that I'm trying to explain here, and wondering whether you've had yourself. And so, it happened to be one day when I was living in East London with some housemates. They all thought I was nuts as well. And I suppose, without knowing, I had been creating a cerebral environment that was conducive to this experience through imagination. I use my imagination constantly, perhaps as in a form of escapism. Day-to-day life is quite monotonous, quite robotic, quite sort of drone-like. So on the way to work, for example, I'd just be imagining things. I'm not very much wasn't present, and that's part of the reason I wasn't that great at school and even at work. It's like most of the time I'm daydreaming or just drifting off. And I feel like that is really what we think of, or we talk about when we say meditation. It doesn't have to be this thing where we just sit down and allocate a set time where we sit crossed legs and start doing the breathing techniques. It can be something that you're doing when you're swimming, cycling, working, God forbid, when you're at school, that's a part of human nature, and it gets sort of written out and frowned upon. And so a lot of what we should have been teaching in the realms of consciousness, imagination, intuition, how is it we're actually experiencing this school anyway? How is it that I'm actually experiencing Hastings right now? We need to become more introspective and more divergent in our thought patterns than this sort of convergent model where we've just got constantly this information being bombarded at us. And this has created the prison that I'm talking about, that's stopping people from realizing what Neo realizes, a third of the way through the first Matrix film, and of course how they just show in other films. So it's interesting because it's just something where you're very much 2 feet in society. Your feet are on the ground. You're going to the pub. You're doing the rat race. You're living for the weekend. You're getting paid, and you're there. You're present. So you're able to make friends. And your whole life model is oriented around that state of consciousness. But then one day it just changes like that. And now you're a different person, it seems, even though that part of yourself is still there. It's just now a tiny aspect of your being. You've ultimately undergone this metamorphosis. You've undergone this transformation that no one else around you has. So invariably what happens is those friends don't resonate with you anymore. You have to sort of learn to let go of that life in a way. You have to mourn your own personality, and that's a tough time, and now having now looked through the dark side of human history, you get more and more alienated, isolated, because your interests now are sort of transcendent. They're not now personalized to your own little creative endeavors. You're much more interested in humanity. You're interested in some sort of loftier projects. You're interested in transforming society into a better way of being for everyone. You're more concerned with well-being and liberation. And but yet most people around you aren't, and that's the struggles that I've been having with this New Earth movement, is that, you know, I feel like we're not really yet at the time and place where we are ready for freedom. We want to continue, just like how they say in the Matrix. You have to understand, Neo, so many people are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. So people are actually like very reluctant and, you know, reactant against change, or even the statement that we are psychologically enslaved and we are rent slaves. That doesn't sit very well with people who haven't yet attained this high level of consciousness. So your path becomes more and more isolated. You know, you'll start to embody the Hermit Tarot card for a number of years of your life, and you know, it's something that I keep getting sort of thrown back to, because it's like, well, what am I going through? Like, who am I? I've lost my sense of self. I've lost my identity. I don't really know who or what I'm doing anymore. I don't feel like I'm remotely participating in society or useful to anyone, because it's like, well, I'm not able to just get on with it, you know, like I was formerly, like just do these buildings. Like as an architect, I was able to, you know, formally do projects and things like, but ultimately you end up realizing that you're just helping the rich. What am I doing? Like, this is a total waste of time. In fact, it's similar to, you know, what Dante explains in, you know, his epic poem, you know, of, you know, Dante's Inferno, where like, you know, one day he's having his life. He's quite a successful politician, you know, he's socializing, and, you know, he's got friends, and he's got a whole sort of like situation there where he's got 2 feet in the world. But then one day, just magically, he realizes, or starts to ask, you know, he realizes that he has absolutely no idea what he's doing. And so that there lies the beginning of his journey through the Inferno, through the Purgatory, and through the Paradise. And so like this is a very startling, just how they depict, like I say in the films, Truman Show, that experience for anyone to go through. So that's why I'm making this video, to try and sort of reach people who perhaps have, you know, experienced this as well, and they would like to connect with others who of a similar mindset. Because otherwise it's like, you know, I, you know, wake up every day and I feel like I'm having to present a false version of myself, or it feels like you know, sometimes I wish that I could have a switch and go back to who I was, because then I'd be able to, you know, participate in the things that I used to be able to participate in, and still would enjoy in some ways, but it's just like, I'm not quite there anymore. I'm not quite present, because I'm too concerned or too interested in these deeper fields that, you know, for the most part people can't or aren't interested in having a conversation about. And so that's really the reason for me making these videos. And you know, if you resonate with what I've just said there, and if you feel like, you know, you want to share any of your experiences, I'd love to hear from you. And you know, especially if it was like an abrupt sort of day for you, where just suddenly this all dawned on you, and like, you know, what was it that acted as the catalyst for that? For me, it was Robert Lanza, and just reading some of his statements, metaphysical statements in his work by Centrism, where he's beginning to realize, and you know, science is beginning to catch up with spirituality, which is great. It might be a sort of slow burner, but you know, I think we'll get there eventually. And that was the catalyst for me, but it won't be the catalyst for someone else. You know, I showed the housemates that I was living at the time the video that, you know, of course they just think, well, just show me something you don't know. You know, we don't know, Adam. And but yeah, for you've totally just pierced through this illusion. You realize like you are your environment. You realize that consciousness is something that's actually universal. It's like a signal that we're receiving, and the brain is just ultimately assimilating that and receiving it, and it's a persistent reality for us whilst this brain is active. You know, change the chemical makeup of the brain, for example, and as any hallucinogenic will directly reveal to you, is like, you know, what you thought was this external sort of fixed reality is nothing of a sort. It's just whatever you imagine it to be, it becomes. And it's like lucid dreaming, which we can have you know, talk about in another video. So anyway, you know, the whole idea is that we are coming together to create, you know, instead of this sort of sense of escapism that a lot of people on the spiritual journey want to sort of embrace, it's like, well, what are we trying to escape from? Why don't we try and transform and transmute the darkness of this world and make this into a utopian dream? You know, instead of us running away and wanting to create these societies way out in the woods, and that's great, but it's like, well, let's do it in a sense that we're not trying to run away from something, but we're trying to transform it and bring people into the movement itself. So you can check out newearth.land or the temporary URL that I've got going on down below in the description, and do get in touch, do write a comment. I'd love to know about your experiences with spirituality, and where you've come from, and how you've got to this point, how you're feeling right now in the journey. I didn't see this sort of dark night of the soul coming, but that hits, and it's like a long, endless, sometimes it seems, sort of little period of your life where you just feel a bit lost, sixes and sevens, and you're in a state of disarray. So that's what I'm going through right now, and I'm hoping that I can get back on my feet again soon, and hopefully try and get some of this message out into the world so that we can live more freely. Shelter, energy, food and water, those things should be basic human rights. Do check out the URL below if you're interested in learning more about that. Anyway, I'm interested in the meantime learning about your spiritual awakening, so do get in touch, and let me know. I look forward to it. All right, cheers.